coverage of Grand Prix Orlando. I'm Marshall Sutcliffe in the booth with Paul Cheon, and we're ready for the quarterfinals here. Chris Pacula, we watched him play throughout the course of the weekend a lot because he was always one of the top-ranked players in the field. He went 12-0 to start his tournament out, and then ran it up into a top 8 finish here. His opponent, Jack Dobbin, actually ended up finishing higher in the seedings because Chris took 2 intentional draws down the stretch to make top 8.
Yeah, you just want to make sure you lock in that top 8. Make sure you qualify for that next Pro Tour, and then you can just figure it out later. Of course, you would prefer a higher seed, especially with Chris's deck. It's a pretty aggressive deck. He just wants to attack with his very efficiently costed green monsters. But at the end of the day, the top 8 is the most important thing.
It's a big deal for Chris as well.
Yeah.
Those of you that watched the Enter the Battlefield documentary will remember Chris Pacula. He was one of the storylines that we got to see there about a narrow miss that he had actually on making the Hall of Fame for the Pro Tour.
Yeah.
And, you know, I know that Chris is hoping that another solid tournament finish from him here, maybe even a victory, you know, might drum up a little more interest for that.
Closer and closer.
Yeah, you know, every little bit helps.
Right, and again, this qualifies him for the Pro Tour, and maybe he can string together a couple of good finishes and maybe get back on the train.
Chris has kept his 6-card hand here on the mulligan. He scryed a card to the bottom. Yeah, I know a lot of, you know, current-day Magic players weren't really that familiar with Chris until Enter the Battlefield came out, and it really kind of shined a light on multiple storylines that people didn't know, multiple people. But, you know, Chris was one of the ones that really resonated with a lot of people from the documentary.
Yeah. He is also I believe he's played every single season. He does frequently play in the Vintage Super League, which is also
yeah, he joined it a little later, but yeah.
Right, but he is on the Vintage Super League, and he does play under the twitch.tv/magic on Tuesdays.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's always fun to watch him play. Also, you know, and again, you know, for those of you that kind of got to know him through the documentary, he's a talker. You know, Chris has always been known for his stories and his personality. He's kind of one of those big personalities in the game. Now, Jack Dobbin on their side of the table, I'm looking at his deck list here, and it seems that he is playing. Let's see what he's on here.
I see Forests and Swamps. Does he have a Winding Constrictor? That's the first thing.
Yeah,
you want to try to figure out here.
He is playing Forests and Swamps, though.
Looks like he's got a couple of copies of Unbridled Growth. Maybe he's got some Revolt cards in his deck.
I can't really tell from reading his deck list what he's actually playing versus what's in his pile. These are the lists, I believe, that the players get to see. So, yeah, why don't you explain that? The players, of course, get to see their pools, but not their decks.
Right, that's what it is. And we are currently just basically given the deck list of all the cards here. Jack only playing with 2 copies of Unbridled Growth. If you watched kind of the last match heading into the top 8, we had 4 players. We had 4 copies of Unbridled Growth, which you know, he went a little deep, and it actually ended up kind of hurting him and cost him the match.
So a slow start here for Pacula. We see an Ether Chaser and a Karizev. Not bad, a good start, but not bad from Jack Dobbin on the other side. Kind of an annoying configuration of cards for Chris to deal with here, really kind of preventing him from attacking with either of his generally pretty good attackers for 2 mana.
Yeah, I do like Druid of the Cal. I know a lot of people say, well, there's not a lot of things to do with your mana, but one of the big things that I like about Druid of the Cal, blocks Ether Chaser. That's huge.
It's just another thing that's great about Druid of the Cal. Underrated Druid of the Cal. I'm saying it right now.
Right. I think it was overrated.
Agreed.
To the point where people started disliking it, and now I think it might be a little bit underrated.
I agree 100%, Paul. I saw that same pattern myself. It's a good card. One of the knocks on it, of course, is that there's not quite as much to do with your mana in the late game in this format, but you can find ways to make it work, like cast Cowl Prowler, for example.
Yeah, just ramping into a Cowl Prowler is a totally fine thing to do. Jack's actually doing a pretty good job of mucking up the ground here. Chris doesn't really have a great attack. Jack putting a die on top of his deck just to remind himself that there is a Scrounging Bandar trigger that happens every single upkeep.
Yeah, that's smart.
Yeah.
You'll see astute players do that. to make sure that they don't miss their triggers.
And if you notice, Jack has had a play every single turn. He has not cashed in his Unbridled Growth yet, signaling that he has some kind of a revolt spell. And he's basically, as long as he's tapping on every single turn for a threat, he doesn't actually have to crack it until he basically runs out of cards to play.
Yeah, there's two reasons. I mean, it could
Right.
be that or a splash. You know, he could have a red card in there or something that he's concerned about drawing and has other plays anyway, so you may as well just wait.
Yeah. He could also very easily have something like, a Lifecraft Cavalry. I think I saw a Lifecraft Cavalry in
Totally.
his deck.
And I can tell you, by the way, looking at his list here, he does run 1 Plains in his deck. I'm going to look at what that's for
I'm going to guess Thopter Arrest.
You're going to say Thopter Arrest.
That is
you
my
would
guess.
be incorrect.
Oh.
Where-
Not the first time.
Where are the gold cards here? Where is he running? I see. So these are all the cards he's running, then it's hidden stockpile.
Interesting.
If these are all the cards that he's running, then this is a hidden stockpile. Yeah,
Splashing for a hidden stockpile.
that's what it looks like.
All right, trying to go deep on the Revolt.
Indeed.
There's an Attune with Ether in the deck, along with double Unbridled Growth and a Plains. So that's 4 white sources.
And as you mentioned, he does in fact have a Lifecraft Cavalry as well, which is that's a really powerful card when you can get the Revolt going. When not, it's just okay.
Yeah. But I would guess that if Jack does run out of things to do with the mana, float a white, sack the Unbridled Growth to see if you can draw another threat.
This is something that you and I talked about a minute ago, Paul. A Self-Assembler, not one of the most powerful cards, but Chris was a little bit short on playables, and he picked up 2 Self-Assemblers late in pack 3, and he ended up running them. And it looks pretty good here. He worked his way up to 5 mana, and, this is kind of where those cards tend to shine.
Right, yeah. It might be a little slow, but it is still card advantage. Right now, it's looking pretty good when both players aren't really doing a whole lot. But the Self-Assembler is not very good at blocking that Fen Hauler.
Terrible at it. Even
cast.
2 of them.
Yeah.
Doesn't get any better from here.
Yeah, I would guess that Jack is going to be attacking for 5 here.
Yeah, definitely.
He has enough blockers. The board was exactly the same, and Chris chose not to attack with the red creatures. So nothing's really changed here. Chris might choose to attack with the Self-Assembler, however. So I was going to mention that what Jack could do is put a second counter on the High Spire Artisan, which allows him to block the Self-Assembler and not lose a creature.
Yeah, that's
So
smart. He
allows
also...
him
Go ahead.
It allows him to play offense and defense here.
Yeah, interestingly, he does also have Revolt.
It does trigger Revolt.
Yeah, so if he has something he wants to do,
He has lots of Revolts.
He's really revolting it here. Yeah, so he's going to go ahead and make his Fen Hauler an even bigger threat.
Yeah, the Druid of the Cowl also just does a good job of blocking the Ether Chaser. So, yeah, Jack's creatures lining up pretty nicely against Chris's.
Yeah, Chris has to be frustrated just with the exact sequence of creatures that Jack has drawn. He's just not able to get in any damage, and sitting there at 20 life for both players, he's just going to have to take 6 from the Fen Hauler.
Wow, and
Jeez,
a Crusher as
the
well.
hits keep coming, don't they?
Well, this Druid of the Cowl not looking so bad here. Jack has basically used his mana every single turn of the game so far. So we know Chris has another Self-Assembler in hand, but
Yeah, that's the one for sure.
again, not doing a whole lot. Chris should be down to 14 here. But Jack has 2 threats on the board that are both gigantic.
Right.
And these small red creatures, they're good early, not really good at blocking in the late game. Ooh.
This is interesting. Chris is going to get in there.
How many precise strikes in Chris's hand right here?
I think he only got 1 in the deck.
Yeah. So this attack could be one of 2 things. It could be that Chris has some kind of a combat trick here. At the same time, he might want to just attack to trigger Revolt because he does have a Lifecraft Cavalry in his deck. And having a 6/6 on the board to be able to trade with that Fen Hauler is pretty big here.
So it looks like Jack wants
is
to
he main
crew
decking
up.
the Obsolescence?
Yeah, it looks like it.
Oh my, this
Wow.
is huge.
What a blowout. So Jack kind of goes for it, tries to get the big profitable block, and instead he's taking all of it.
Yeah.
That's 9 damage.
Yeah, that is 9 damage. But keep in mind, Jack can also attack back for, quite a bit himself.
Yeah, it just didn't look like things. It looks like things were just slipping away a little bit from Chris, so he decided to get aggressive with that, and it paid off in a big attack. But now all of a sudden we have a full-on race. It's just a slugfest until one player blinks.
Yeah, that was a pretty risky crew there, because if Chris had something like an Appetite for the Unnatural or Natural Obsolescence, Jack has no blockers.
Yep.
He could have alternatively just opted to block the Ether Chaser or the Self-Assembler with the High Spire Artisan. Oh, okay, so I see another white card in his hand that he's splashing for. It looks like it's a Dawn Feather Eagle.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I do see that.
Ooh, and also Deadeye Harpooner. Okay,
Yeah.
so
he is kind of going off.
Yeah, he's going. He's all about the revolt.
But I got to say, this is really where this type of card is so good. Dawn Feather Eagle in a race.
Oh yes,
Right, because now he gets to
Absolutely.
slam in for a ton of damage, and on top of that, he has his blockers back.
Oh yeah, Chris is going to need something like a destructive tampering to maybe try to steal this game, but Jack also has a flyer to block with.
Yeah, he does. Like that was probably just the game-winning play right there. That Dawn Feather Eagle.
Yeah, that was
I
totally
believe that
brutal.
Chris is going to have to chump here.
right. Yeah, but he can't chump the Fen Hauler. That's just 7 damage that he's locked into taking, because of course Servos cannot block the Fen Hauler.
Yep.
So that's 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 damage Chris takes. Probably goes down. I think he goes down to 3 life here.
Oh my goodness, what a beating! That Dawn Feather Eagle was so good for Jack.
Yeah.
He's going to be pretty happy he splashed that.
And he still hasn't had the need to sacrifice that Unbridled Growth for an extra card. Just every single turn, it's been a haymaker.
Mm-hmm.
And Chris is at 3 life. Does he have an answer to this flyer? Or any of the other creatures on the board?
My incredible knowledge of body language says no, I don't think he does, but he wants to make sure.
Yeah.
We know one card in his hand is a Self-Assembler. That's not
Right.
going to do anything for him here, though.
Chris's only option here likely involves attacking with all of his creatures. Again, I mean, he could have a removal spell still and just kind of thinking through all of the possible lines of play. He does have a Prey Upon in his deck, which you can
Okay.
use to fight the Self-Assembler with the Dawn Feather Eagle.
He's going to attack with Carry Zev.
Okay. So Jack just wondering here, it's like, how can I die here? If he takes 3 damage, maybe an Invigorated Rampage, followed by 2 more pump spells, something along those lines. I imagine Jack's going to be doing some kind of blocking. He can't really prevent the revolt from happening because the 2/1 token will be exiled at the end of combat. So Jack could just choose to take 1 from Karizev and maybe just block the token with perhaps the 2/5, because I don't think he wants to lose the Fen Hauler to a combat trick. Oh, okay. It looks like he blocked
He
both.
double blocked
Yeah.
Carry Zev there. All right.
All right.
Ooh, and it's a Lifecraft Cavalry here.
But Chris is at 3 life. This must be a Prey Upon. It has to be.
It is. It absolutely is.
Wow.
Oh, wow. Chris really with a big turn here manages to get himself revolt and take off the lethal threat. He's still in a precarious position, but, if he gets to untap from this point, he could be right back in it. 6/6 with trample is no joke.
So Jack can choose to attack with the Fen Hauler here just to kind of trade with the Lifecraft Cavalry. But, okay, now we need to cash this in. Tap for a white, because he does have a few other white cards in his deck. See what he draws. What is it? Let's see. I can make out a Wild Wanderer in his hand and a Defiant Salvager. So I wonder if he has a way to deal with that Lifecraft Cavalry so he can start getting in there with the Fen Hauler, or maybe some kind of combat trick to kind of like attack through it. Because you do know Chris still has the last card in Chris's hand is the Self-Assembler.
Jack knows it, too.
Yeah.
Defiant Salvager.
Okay, so Jack,
Just
happy
gonna
to
force a chump block or a trade.
Yeah, I imagine the trade's happening here.
Yep, that's what Chris does. He
Yeah.
just trades off. Uh-oh, what is this? Ooh, a Procata pillar bug.
Just a bug, but he's got currently just looking at the board. He's got 5 creatures. Even if Chris plays, so if Chris plays a self-assembler, I guess Jack could get Chris down to 2 if he blocks all the big creatures because there are 2 1-power creatures on the side of Jack Dobbins' board. But Jack doesn't really have any large creatures here. That self-assembler is kind of the biggest creature on the board, and he's got 2 of them.
Ooh, he's got a Pima Outrider also.
Okay.
He's going to make a servo, maximum defense acquired,
Yeah.
and then pass the turn back to Jack.
Yeah, Jack doesn't really have a good attack here anymore. The self-assembler would go in front of, the pillar bug. The Ether Chaser can go in front of the salvager. Jack could choose to eat a servo at sorcery speed. And okay.
A Wild Wanderer.
Gets him his white splash.
So he's just building out his board wider and wider and wider.
Yeah. He's just trying to basically get more creatures on the board than Chris. And Chris just has to be happy that he's still alive here.
Now, one of the interesting things is we saw Chris, second or third pick? A Destructive Tampering?
That would win
That
him
would
the game.
just snap it off right here if he drew it.
Yep.
But it looks like he's going to go for the other self-assembler.
This is why playing against the red decks is so scary when you kind of hit this board stall.
Yeah, this is not the spot that Jack wants to be in. He would die to Destructive Tampering.
So Chris currently has 4 creatures, 2 Jack, 6, so still can only get him down to 1 life. Did Jack draw another creature or a removal spell? A removal spell would also get it done here. Right. Going into tank here. Not a whole lot changed. Chris played a bigger creature than Jack on the previous turn, so he must have drawn something here, which is making him kind of think about what he should be doing.
He's passed turn back.
Okay.
Just
Just analyzing the board. And Chris just basically hoping he draws the Destructive Tampering.
Yeah, you could see a scenario where he starts to attack with his Iron Trick Crusher down the line here.
He can, but that does kind of shut off a creature, and Jack's got 6 creatures on the battlefield, so Chris still has to be very careful. Jack can also, he can't afford to take 6 damage off the Crusher.
No. I mean, he could, yeah, but if Chris can, build out his board a little bit.
Yeah, of course. Chris has to continue drawing creatures here.
Yeah.
Then at some point, maybe he can start attacking with the Crusher.
Yeah, unfortunately, he drew a land this turn, but that's exactly what Jack drew on his turn as well, so it's kind of back and forth here with the lands. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Chris wants to know how many creatures do you have?
Yeah, so if Chris didn't draw a land, if Chris drew a land, he cruised the Crusher with the Outrider, has 4 blockers to Jack's 6 attackers.
That's no bueno.
Yeah. It would have put Chris only down to 1.
It's true.
Yeah. Wow.
Oh, man, that's a good draw there for Jack Dobbin. He has found a lethal flyer with the Foundry Screecher.
Oh, yeah. So I can't imagine Jack's going to attack you. He's just going to play that Foundry
Ship
Screecher,
it.
just pass the turn and hope it doesn't die. Chris does have a turn to draw Tampering, but even if he draws Tampering, Jack can block with a flyer. But is that still lethal?
I'm not sure. I can tell you one card that Chris does have in his hand.
What is that? Oh, it
Well,
would
you
still
know
be
what it is.
lethal.
It's Precise Strike, of course.
Oh,
what
yeah,
else
of
would he
course.
have?
Sorry. It's kind of like a ley line. It's just kind of just always in his opening
Yeah,
hand.
it's just in his opener. It just starts there.
At this point, I think Chris's only out is just to be aggressive here and kind of attack with everything, right? If he doesn't have a removal spell, Jack's certainly not going to be blocking with the bat. But Jack also has a pillar bug, so that's Jack's effectively at 11 life here as well. Ooh, okay. What is this? 5 mana. Okay. Lifecraft Cavalry, that's not going to get it done. Is Chris not going to... Chris has to attack with everything here, right? He's just going to die to the bat. Jack just needs to make sure he makes the correct blocks here.
Chris, very aggressive attack.
Yeah.
He knows he's dead in the air. Ship him.
Yeah. I don't exactly know what he's thinking. Maybe he's trying to convey that he doesn't have some kind of a combat trick, so he's just like, do I want to keep things back? But again, one important thing is that Jack needs to make sure he doesn't block. He leaves at least one of his artifacts up.
That's right. It's a really critical piece of the puzzle here. His artifacts right now are Prakata, Pillar Bug, and Servo.
All right, time to block. All right. Druid of the Cow on the Ether Chaser here. Something small is likely going to go in front of the Crusher. I don't think Jack can play around in Invigorated Rampage, but if he can, that's something to be mindful of. He could put a Servo, for example, in front of the Crusher.
What's Chris's mentality right now?
Chris is
this just desperation?
hoping he doesn't block.
Yeah. Or that he gets rid of his artifacts or whatever.
Yeah, something along those lines. But the thing is, he does.
I mean, he's just dead, right? So
Right. The thing is, if Jax just somehow has two ground creatures survive after this, Jack still has lethal just by attacking with the 2 ground creatures and a 2/1 Screecher, even if he loses all of his artifacts. Oh, and he opts to keep this. It looks like he's maybe going to opt to keep the Servo around instead so that he could gain the 2 life off the Pillar Bug. So yeah, if he blocks this way, Jack's going to take 3 damage here. He can try to gain the life off the Pillar Bug. Chris has a Precise Strike, but that's not going to do a whole lot. He can use the Precise Strike to get rid of the High Spire Artisan, and Jack can still attack back. Again, yeah, Jack's very mindful. He doesn't want to block with the Servo. He wants to keep an artifact back. And if he does that, he will win this game. So now we're looking at 3 damage, it looks like.
seems like a pretty acceptable amount of damage to take.
Absolutely.
There are combat tricks, of course, that Jack is going to be considering here, though. He has to really wonder what he can play around fully.
Yeah.
You know, Invigorated Rampage is the type of card that can be responsible to get in a lot of extra damage.
So the only creature that hasn't been blocked is the 3/3 Pima Outrider.
Mm-hmm.
As the Lifecrack Cavalry. That's kind of on the side there. It basically just crewed the Crusher. It is interesting that Jack opted not to give the bug lifelink.
Yeah, he didn't bother, but it didn't matter.
Chris pretty animated there.
Chris is, showing his extreme displeasure at the situation by laughing and joking around. But that is Jack Dobbin winning game number 1 over Chris Pikula. That was a desperation attack for Chris just to see if Jack would make a mistake, maybe leave himself artifactless or something along those lines, and it didn't work. So Jack Dobbin up a game over Chris Pikula. We'll be back right after these messages. quarterfinals of the top 8. And I've got a couple of match updates for you here, Paul.
Okay.
Joel Larson. He's won 2-0 over his opponent, Patrick Tierney. So a swift dispatch of Patrick there. Noah Walker. He won 2-0
Wow.
against Alexander Hayne.
Okay.
So Noah through. I did have a chance to talk to Alex for just a minute about his deck. He was not happy with it. He said,
Okay.
look, he said, I've done better with worse. Like he understands that he doesn't always get to have a great deck in the top 8 of these things, but he said he really had a hard time finding his colors where he was going to be colors wise, and it came back to get him.
Yeah, the draft was pretty tricky. Even while we were watching Chris's draft, after 3 or 4 picks, it was really hard to try to figure out what was open. I think, kind of going back at Yoel's draft, he kept himself very open, and he did identify that blue was open, and he might be one of the only blue drafters at the table. You would, it's not like the blue cards were overly powerful, but often you just saw packs with basically 4 cards left in the pack, 3 of them being blue.
Mm.
And so he kind of got the lion's share of that, and he ended up with, I think one of the best possible decks he could have had, rather, for his seat.
By the way, we've got another semifinalist. So this is actually the last match going now in the quarters. Zile Yao has defeated George Mantia 2-0. So
Jeez,
it went
this is
2-0,
fast.
2-0, 2-0, and then we've got a 1-0 right now here.
Yeah. And looking at Chris's deck, he does have a premium common in the multiple shocks, and and he also has the Chandra's Reprisal, but he's playing against another green deck. And that's kind of the matchup where shock is kind of at its worst. Whoa. Universal Solvent. Typically not a card you see out of a green-black deck.
I am surprised to see that.
Yeah.
Especially since Chris, while he didn't have a particularly aggressive draw in game 1, and by the way, it must be noted he doesn't have a particularly aggressive draw here either.
Right.
His deck did look aggressive, right? Like he had a lot of big beaters and a lot of attackers, and there's a good chance that a card like Universal Solvent never gets activated if you're playing against a steady stream of, curve-out style creatures.
It is possible that, because these players have access to each other's deck lists, Jack saw the free gem Regent in Chris Picula's deck, and maybe he doesn't have a lot of removal. So he's just like, I know this card isn't the most efficient way to deal with a bomb, but it is maybe a necessary evil. And just as I talk about how Chandra's Reprisal might not have as many targets, Chris Picula gets a clean 2-for-1 here.
Wow. That's pretty nice.
Yeah.
Little Servo is the only thing left standing.
It's really interesting, though. I don't know if Chris Mulligan, but he had no plays in the first 3 turns of the game.
Well, he's going to start making plays now. He can play a self-assembler, or
is he going to get the chain going here?
Yeah, he can. It's the best use of his mana.
It is the best use of his mana. Also, there is the chance that he draws the other self-assembler, and that's when you would just feel really, really bad.
Yeah, but he looks at it and he says, well, if I play out this Iron Tread Crusher first, I will be able to start attacking with it next turn.
Yeah, but Jack played his first Crusher, so he might be more interested in using that Crusher for defense.
Wow.
If
this
that
is
was
a
your
beating, too.
yeah.
Did you see that, Paul?
Yes.
He played Fenhaller using the Servo
and the Solvent.
and the Solvent plus all the lands, and then used it to crew and attack with his Crusher. So Chris is already down to 12.
Wow.
And this is one of the downsides to the whole vehicle thing, is that, now all of a sudden Chris is in the position where he wants to use his Crusher to block. Now, he can do that, but it's risky.
Yeah. And Chris has a lot of large creatures that he can deploy, but it's a self-assembler and a Crusher. Neither of those creatures are are good at blocking the Fenhaller.
Fenhaller's just going to smash. And when you say not very good at, you mean
They just literally can't.
bad. Yeah.
And the thing is, looking at Chris's hand, he also had a Pima Outrider in hand. Gets outclassed, actually, by the Fenhaller.
Crazy.
Yeah.
This is not looking good for Picula here.
Yeah, and I don't think he also just can't afford to attack. Jack can just play a creature and attack him for 12.
Yeah. Yeah, picking a fight here seems like a tall order for Picula. He's going to need a real special game plan to make that work.
Yeah. So, yeah, in the previous turn, I thought it was very unlikely that Chris was wanting to go on the aggressive with the Iron Tread Crusher. And if that's the case, you can always just wait to play it on the turn that you want to block, because he couldn't block that turn. So then you want to maximize your mana, play the self-assembler, get the other one, so you don't have the chance of drawing the other assembler. And this turn, he could have played the Crusher and also keep up shock.
Yeah, it's tough because Chris just has yet to have a curve out draw with his deck. It's
Right.
we're looking at turn 4 and he hasn't done anything. He's thinking about making his first play.
Yeah, and he did have that interesting decision of Thriving Rhino versus Pima Outrider, and he opted for the Outrider.
That's right.
Despite not having that many 3-drops in his deck. And he has a Pima Outrider in his hand.
Yeah, he does. Subtle Strike?
Just main phase.
He's just running out Subtle Strike because it makes it a 2-turn clock, Paul.
Yeah, that makes
He
sense.
just says, you know what? I'm going to kill you in 2 turns. You have to put up something that can deal with this thing.
Yeah. And Chris Pikula does have a Pima Outrider. Basically, at this point, he likely is just going to play a Pima Outrider, block the Fenhauler, and then choose to shock it to finish it off.
That's what he's going to do. You know what's crazy, too, is that Subtle Strike ends up being pretty important here, too, because Chris, if he really wanted, and in fact, he maybe still wants to do this, he does have a Prey Upon.
Ah, okay.
And now he could potentially trade off if he just feels like he needs to do it, and he does.
Okay.
But the Subtle Strike means it's a trade rather than just gobble up your
Right.
Fenhauler.
And he can't. He does not have enough green mana to play the Pima Outrider.
No, but at least he found a play, Scrounging Bandar. He still is potentially going to have to chump block with this if Jack can find a 2-powered creature or more.
Yeah, another reason why Jack's lined that turn of making it a 2-turn clock, another reason why it was pretty nice is because he also has 6 lands and a Universal Solvent, right? If Chris's plan is to just play a colored creature and just pass the turn, all Jack needs to do is draw a 7th land, play it, get rid of that creature, and then he just wins with the Fenhauler.
Yeah, that's a great point. Chris, of course, seeing that coming. Wow, so close, by the way.
Yeah.
Jack, one measly power away from being able to force Chris to just chump block with a Scrounging Bandar.
But he did not have it.
But he doesn't have it.
Yeah. But Jack still in an okay spot. He's got Chris down to 6, right? He has 6 mana on the battlefield. If he draws a 7th land, he can still use the Solvent.
Shaka's going to take down the Servo.
Keeps Jack a little further away from being able to crew.
So-
Okay.
Yep. So Chris, this is smart. He's going to put his Scrounging Bandar counters on his self-assembler to get it to the same size as a Crusher.
Now he can play a Lifecraft Cavalry.
And he gets Revolt. Interesting.
Yeah.
This is starting to get good here. Chris Pikula may be mounting a nice comeback in this game. It looked pretty bad a couple of turns ago.
So if I'm on Chris's side, I think I would opt to attack with the Assembler because he might be concerned that Jack might be able to, play a creature to crew the vehicle. But if he does, then he won't be able to activate the Universal Solvent.
And you'll be able to trade anyway.
Right.
Yeah, you can't do both.
And one of those creatures are eventually going to die. There's a Universal Solvent on the board with the 6 mana.
By the way, I see a Dawnfeather Eagle in hand for Jack. He's going to play. He doesn't have white mana, though. He's going to play an Implement of Ferocity.
He could draw the
Crack it.
planes here.
Oh, he drew another white card. The splash is punishing Jack
This-
here.
Sometimes
Look at Chris Pikula turn the corner here.
Right.
Now all of a sudden he's the one who's ahead.
Jack being a little bit punished here for looking to go 3 colors, and it's not even splashing for 1 card. There's 3 white cards in his deck that he's playing.
He drew the Deadeye Harpooner. I'll tell you what, if he draws one of his Unbridled Growths, he'll be pretty happy here.
Yeah, and now Jack forced to basically just block,
Yeah.
and he's and
He takes
he
6.
cannot crew the Crusher.
Is
Jack
there a
is now
shock
down
in
to
hand
2.
for Chris? No. Chris does have 2 shocks in his deck, does he not?
Yeah.
He must not have the other one in his hand. And,
And I would make a servo here, yes, just in case Jack has a removal spell followed up by a big creature.
Yep, that makes
or something
sense.
along those lines.
Wow,
But that's it.
Chris
Wow.
Pikula with the comeback evens things up. I saw the not like this is starting to pop up in the chat, but in this case, no, it was not.
What a
like
turnaround.
this.
I mean, Chris didn't have a fast start, and Jack, I even think he played it correctly by putting Chris on a 2-turn clock, but that was a clutch Prey Upon.
It was a really smart play by Chris. You don't never want to 2-for-1 yourself, but it made sense there.
Better
He
than
got
dying.
the job done. Yeah, way better than dying. And he got the job done. We're going to see a game 3 right after these messages. Grand Prix Orlando. We get an exciting Game 3 conclusion. This is our last quarterfinal.
It looks like
Going here. Yeah, Jack Dobbin versus Chris Pikula. Jack's going to be on the play, perhaps taking a mulligan here.
yeah, it looks like he's going to 6.
You're getting that vibe too, are you?
Maybe he just wanted to see what Chris does before presenting. Just milk every last minute of this top 8. Yeah, Chris, with a slow start in that second game, but that Chandra's reprisal, Furious reprisal was a huge, huge swing.
Okay, we are underway here, though.
Ooh, you know what I see in Chris Pikula's hand?
What do you got?
Free Jam Regent.
Okay, that could be a game ender, but what the real problem he's faced thus far is just not curving out. He keeps having to come from behind. It worked once, and then it didn't work the other time. Shock is going to take care of Ether Poisoner right off the bat.
Yeah. Taking a look here, what do we have?
Okay. How about an Ether Chaser? Now we're in business.
Okay. He has a 1-drop and a 2-drop?
He does. And he took out,
Who is this guy? What have you done with Chris Pikula's deck?
No kidding. We have not seen him use up his mana early. It's been turn 4 before he's cast anything in the other games.
Yeah. Poisoner, while being a very strong card, what's the second best common in black, matches up pretty poorly against that Ether Chaser. Does he have a Druid of the Cowl, though? Feels like rock, paper, scissors.
Kind of does. It's not a Druid of the Cowl.
Yeah.
Just a scrounging Bandar, so that means that Chris does get to attack. Jack's going to just have to take it thanks to the first strike, and we're going to get a servo on the battlefield. Now, do you have a 3-drop too, Chris? Because if you have that,
Thriving Rhino, maybe?
would be perfect. Shock your 2-drop.
Nope.
Ether Chaser, Thriving Rhino, but he doesn't have it.
Right,
See
looks
that
like
Jack has all of his lands
yeah,
here.
he's got all 3 colors, and he's got a Deadeye Harpooner. If he plays a creature this turn, what was this?
That was a Subtle Strike on the block. He blocked with a servo and then Subtle Strike to kill the Bandar.
Oh, and but that turned down the Harpooner.
Yeah, you predicted that if the creature was to go away, it would work.
Yeah.
Precise Strike? Sorry,
Precise Strike.
I meant Precise Strike.
Wow, that was... Chris just snapped off that Precise Strike. That was... Jack's shown a Subtle Strike in his deck.
Yeah.
That was really, really aggressive there.
It really was, but he's just like, I do not care about you, servo.
Yeah.
Or Precise Strike for that matter.
Right.
That's great.
Yeah.
Chad says Precise Strike isn't subtle. They are correct on a number of levels there.
Wow.
Jack was pretty excited about that Harpooner there. It
Jeez.
is hard to kill things with it. And the Dai Young, interestingly, actually kills a Pima Outrider because Chris shocked the turn 2 Ether Poisoner.
And here it is.
There it is, Free Jam Regent. This is a huge question because right now, Jack either needs to be able to race or kill a Free Jam Regent. Chris does not block the Harpooner. That's a pretty standard issue.
Yeah,
For multiple reasons.
This is a pure race, and I think Jack's basically used most of his removal spells here. He's used a
think you're
Harpooner.
right.
He has the Solvent, but he's still a couple lands away from that.
Does he have a Solvent in his hand?
No, I'm just thinking about the possible outs that he has to this Free Jam Regent.
Just move all in, Chris.
Yeah. Jack is currently at 18. He would need a mountain to make this into a 2-turn clock.
He would. That's kind of interesting. Let's see what he does. I'm really curious. He's just going to hit for 4. He must have a good play to make this turn.
Okay.
Yeah, he does. Another Pima Outrider. That makes sense. But wait, there's more. Oh, he gets to kill the Harpooner. What this does is he's not actually worried about the 2/2, but a card like Aerial Maneuver would be really annoying here. Or Acrobatic Maneuver, excuse me. Would just be super annoying to kill his dragon, so he's just going to make sure that kind of nonsense doesn't happen.
He just wants to protect the dragon here.
Yeah. And a Harpooner on the board.
We actually saw it earlier. Valentine Mackel was able to pull that off to finish off a Consulate Dreadnought that had an aerial modification on it.
That's right. That was the second victim of that particular Harpooner laying waste to that day. And Chris very intelligently not going to let that happen. So now he's going for the 2-turn clock. Take 8. And this is huge. If Jack cannot find an answer.
Is that it?
He didn't find an answer. And Chris Pikula moves on to the semifinals. Jamming it right in there. And he gets there. So that puts him as the 4th semifinalist. And we are all set here to get rolling we've got, oh, baby. Well, we're going to watch that one. We've got Chris Pakula versus Yoel Larson and Noah Walker versus Zile Yao on the other table. All right, so that is going to do it for the quarterfinals. Here from Orlando, we're going to be getting LSV's best of the best is what Rashad said. Let's take a look at that right now.